Good morning. You are listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. I am your host, Doug Dennison, and we are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, the nation's oldest city at WFOY 1240 AM studios. Through the power of the Internet, this program is being streamed worldwide on 1240news.com. The show will also be archived on RowellAuctions.com, as they are the host and sponsor of this program. Additionally, this show will be posted on YouTube.com. We are going to be talking about real estate auctions, past auctions, upcoming auctions, different real estate markets across the country. We've got a lot of topics today. We've got a special guest who's calling in, Peter Monroe, and Peter is a past president of the Oversight Board of the Resolution Trust Corporation. That was the major liquidation in history for savings and loans, real estate properties, early 90s. Peter did a great job as the guy that kind of orchestrated the whole thing, and looking forward to his call. I want to make sure you all know how and why we're doing this show. Mission statement is to provide an educational experience for listeners and a promotional format for auctions across the country. We we do this live. It's on the area radio. People call in. We also have it on live on the website for the radio station 1240 News. And then we get it out on YouTube, and it goes to various people. Our listeners are real estate brokers, bankers, government officials, real estate media, auctioneers, and the general public. Throw in a bankruptcy attorney every once in a while, a receiver. This is the area that we work in. I've been in real estate auctions for about 20 years, formerly a YMCA director in the Northeast, and then in Miami, Florida as a vice president, and got asked to be involved in real estate auctions and have loved it ever since. Now I work with Rowell Auctions, and we've got our first caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hi, it's Peter Monroe.
Hey, Peter. How are you doing, sir? Thank you so much for calling in today.
Well, it's a pleasure. We go back many, many years, so it's a pleasure to be on this terrific program that you have invented.
Well, thank you, and I gave you a quick promo right before you come on, but tell our listeners who you are and where you're from, and something about your company.
Okay. Currently I live in the Tampa Bay area, and have had a long career in really a couple areas in particular. One is the development and brokerage of commercial real estate. I have to, give a good percentage of allocate a good percentage of my background to that. And then I have my passion really has been, and almost my reason for working to some extent has been that it's given me the opportunity. It gave me the opportunity at the age of 46 to go back to Washington, where I originally had worked in the Nixon administration, working with folks like I was Don Rumsfeld's executive assistant, and basically worked directly with Dick Cheney as well. So that was kind of interesting. So I had a prior career, but after my commercial career in developing shopping centers and offices, it gave me the opportunity to, at 46, to go back to Washington in my prime, and I really got lucky in clawing my way into two types of jobs that were really neat. One was I had the extreme privilege of working as the Chief Operating Officer of the Federal Housing Administration with Jack Kemp. And I will not regale you and bore you with details, but working with Jack Kemp was working with a really ethical person who allowed me to do things that normally political interest would prevent you from doing, and I could follow that up at any point. But the second thing was that I was able to graduate from the position of the Chief Operating Officer at the FHA to become what was president of what was then, and now you're extremely familiar with, president of the Oversight Board of the Resolution Trust Corporation, which basically had the assignment of taking savings and loans institutions or thrifts when they'd been identified as, dead or moribund, not solvent, so on, and basically first, if you will, selling the infrastructure of these institutions, and then very importantly, and kind of my focus also, selling the assets of these companies, clearing the market, something that of course we're not doing today, but clearing the market of these assets. And most of the assets were basically before I got there, the RTC, in my humble opinion, didn't perhaps do the best job in selling real estate. But real estate was a small part of what we had to sell at the RTC. The big asset, the hundreds of billions of assets that we had to deal with, which was $400 billion actually, were commercial mortgages, performing, non-performing, and then a hybrid called performing non-performing, which meant that yes, they were paying, but no, they were unlikely to keep paying. So we had to deal with those commercial assets, and we'll get to that later, because one thing we came up with a way of selling them. I have a deep belief in competition, which is why I believe so thoroughly in the auction process.
Yes.
And we figured out a way to get competition for just a way to generate competition for these commercial assets, which when I got there were being sold in very large pools of 500 million or more, and Wall Street was paying 70 cents on the dollar typically for these great performing commercial mortgages, had no problems at all, and we weren't in a recession, and so on and so forth. And yet the RTC was selling them at 70 cents on the dollar. And when we get to CMBS, I thought there was kind of an amusing way that this all started. So anyway, that my background primarily has been that. It's been commercial real estate. It's been being able to be the kind of civilian, kind of going into government and then getting out.
Yep.
Not staying there as a lobbyist or whatever, just going in, doing your job, getting out.
Mm-hmm.
And the RTC does have the distinction of having kind of done its job and then closing the doors, and that's not too prevalent in government these days.
Not at all. Not at all. And I was involved in the RTC doing
you sure were
many of these auctions, and of course, yep. Something you said just a minute ago kind of sparked my interest. You said that your job was to clean out these assets, and something that we're not doing right now. Number one, why did you feel it was necessary to sell these assets?
Well, the problem was that for any asset class, when you've got when you have an overhang, which we have,
yes,
extremely heavily in residential. I should mention that I could add the fact that I got very involved in maybe 3 of the last 4 years in the residential real estate owned, or in a sense foreclosed properties.
Yep.
And so I have more than a passing knowledge of that area as well. Just but when there's a huge overhang, let's say in housing is a good example. If it's been estimated that there are up to potentially still 11 million mortgages that could well default out of a total number of mortgages in the United States of 55 million, which is 20% of the mortgages. A lot of them are just sitting there with people paying no debt service, and there they are, and that whole process has been exacerbated by the problems, the foreclosure problems that perhaps everyone's been reading about. But there's a real huge issue out there that we're just not facing up to. And as long as those houses are out there, then when you think of a person making a decision as to either to buy a house or to build a house, they're not going to do it because they know that there is this huge shadow inventory of homes out there that are going to hit the market, and so it's an impediment to growth. I mean, you've got to clear the market, and the same goes, frankly, with commercial, where at last count there was roughly a $1 trillion shortfall in the equity necessary to finance the commercial mortgages that are coming up for refinancing over the next 5 years. $1 trillion. The value of commercial in the United States globally fell from 6.7 trillion to 4.7 trillion, which is 2 trillion. And as a result of more let's say scrupulous underwriting, it's a real problem. And again, that overhang is out there. What's going to happen? How is that market going to clean itself out? You just can't have properties just sitting. It's an impediment to growth and development of new properties.
Well, I agree with you completely. Of course, I'm in the auction business. We'd like to sell these properties. The RTC, there were doomsayers saying that if you put all this inventory out on the market, it's going to ruin the market, and the brokers were concerned, and that did not happen at all. It actually enhanced, in my opinion, it enhanced sales, it enhanced broker commissions because they worked with the auction companies, brought buyers, were local offices the auction firms used. Millions of dollars were paid out to brokers, and the market did not go down. What it did is these properties that were out there not doing anything were now purchased, and an infusion of cash to make these properties bigger and better and buy services, and it was a wonderful thing. Peter, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk more about the RTC and a whole bunch of other things, but let me take a quick break, and we will be right back.
Okay.
MarkNet Alliance is a national, membership-based network of 41 auction companies. Our companies are successful auction professionals with proven track records and thriving businesses. The MarkNet companies have a staff of over 540 employees who are working hard every day to meet the goals of their clients during our ever-changing economy. MarkNet companies are able to achieve these goals through cutting-edge technologies and ever-growing investor pools. To view the hundreds of auctions currently being conducted, or for more information, visit marknetalliance.com.
Okay, we're back. This is the National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. We have Peter Monroe on the line. Very happy to have him call in today on a Friday afternoon. Peter, you were the president of the oversight board of the Resolution Trust Corporation. Who was on that board?
Well, these are names that no one will recognize, but on my board, I was a little-known fellow named Alan Greenspan.
Ah.
And then
who was the chairman of the Federal Reserve? Correct.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And then there was a fellow named Nick Brady, who was the Secretary of the Treasury. He was also on my board. And since I was asked to stay on with the Clinton administration, to keep running this thing, I had the incredible pleasure of working with one of the finest people I've ever met, and that's Lloyd Benson, who is also Secretary of the Treasury. Also, we had Jack Kemp was on the board as well, who I guess a few people out there know. He's sadly we don't have anymore. He died, and tragically. And
what was his position at that time?
He was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD.
Okay.
So basically, we had on our board the Chairman of the Federal Reserve, the equivalent of Ben Bernanke today,
yep.
Same position.
Yep.
The Secretary of the Treasury, who, which in Washington is a significant position, and then also Jack Kemp, who, while he was Secretary of HUD, was definitely had a sense of humor and was very proactive. And as an example, he kind of irritated the State Department when when HUD was the first United States governmental agency to recognize the sovereign independence of the country of Estonia.
Okay, that's okay.
I thought he was quite. It was quite a trip working with Jack Kemp. He was a fine man.
Buffalo Bill quarterback, and then a president almost. He was a president possibility back. What year was that? That was late 80? No, 70, 80?
80? No, 80. Let's see, probably I would say 80 and 84 were probably the key times, and then he took the position when Bush came in after Reagan in 88 and 89 is when he, that's when he moved from his political career. He had been a very young congressman from Buffalo, and then he, kind of switched to the executive branch, and he was remarkable in that he was fearless when it came to dealing with interest groups, and he allowed me to kill either kind of ill-conceived projects that were just straight off rip-offs of the federal government, and even whole programs that one in particular was the brainchild of the Reagan folks, which had resulted in extreme losses in apartment projects, where it's very much like there were people acting the way credit agencies were acted during the before the meltdown, where all the incentives were wrong, and where people made bad decisions because of bad incentives, and those decisions had enormous consequences. And so he allowed me to kill that program, and incurring the everlasting wrath of the Mortgage Bankers Association, the MBA. And he just didn't bat an eye. If he thought something was wrong, and I told him it was wrong, he trusted me and allowed me to really kill some stuff. He even allowed me to put in a draft section in the HUD Section 8 program, which is kind of a program that allows lower income folks either to have what are called housing vouchers or a Section 8 can subsidize a project. But he was he basically allowed me to put a provision into the Section 8 project statute that said that the subsidy in Section 8 could not be any greater than the minimum amount necessary to get that project done, because there were all sorts of examples of taking into consideration all federal subsidies, and of course nobody had ever thought about that before. It's really kind of interesting, and it was all based on net present value and so on. So there was kind of a cessation of much activity in that area until people kind of figured out how to determine whether the subsidy was needed.
Yep.
Right. Yep.
Peter, we don't have the RTC anymore. We have the FDIC, and I think actually the FDIC was on your board too, if I remember correctly.
Well, it was interesting. The FDIC wasn't on our board.
Oh, it wasn't. Okay.
But the FDIC actually the FDIC provided, in a sense, a lot of the employees for the RTC.
Okay, right.
So we had there, the FDIC does believe very much in competition.
Yes.
And this is when I think my and the RTC's primary contribution to save approximately $60 billion to reduce the losses from 160 to 100 all revolved around kind of one program that called and a program that has been much abused and was actually so abused by Wall Street and the credit rating agencies and so on that had a major impact on the whole meltdown that occurred, and that was what's called the commercial mortgage-backed securities market. And that I think was really the story of that's where we really made a difference. That's where we really helped the taxpayers was that program. And if, you can tell I'm chomping at the bit to tell you, but I'm not going to.
Don't do it yet.
I'm not going to do it until you allow me to do it.
Because we have to. There's a 30-minute in the middle. It's a break that always comes on, and I know this. This is something that you really want to talk about. I don't want to interrupt your thoughts on that. Real quick, though, compared, we got about a minute before that. How much bigger is this crisis compared to the RTC? Just give me a number. Estimate.
50 times greater.
Wow. That's a big number, Peter. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about CMBS. I also want to talk about the what you feel in regards to what can be done, and also what's the large range view of not only the commercial market over the country but the single family market. We're going to go for a break. Peter, you are a great interview. We're going to go for a quick 2 or 3 minute break to help us pay for the show with sponsors, and we will be right back. Thank you.
And we want to encourage that because we love the show.
You bet.
Come on out to the St. Augustine and St. Johns County Flea Market where the fun begins. There's old, new, and unique items every weekend. Bargain basement prices and something for everyone. Just in time for Christmas shopping. There's a great farmer's market and Charlie's Famous Barbecue. You haven't had barbecue until you try Charlie's, and you won't find better baked beans. Churches and charities get a free booth 2 days each month. Business owner display 50% off rental prices. RV parking and outside storage, the best prices in the Tri-County area. Second month free on outside storage. Every Saturday and Sunday, the St. Johns County Flea Market is open from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. State Road 207 and I-95.
Licensed by the state as a skilled nursing facility and certified for a broad range of payer types, the Ponce Therapy Care Center's team of professionals is committed to providing the best nursing care and rehabilitation services. Choosing a skilled nursing facility for a loved one is always a difficult decision. At the Ponce Therapy Care Center, our admissions and social service staff assist you in making an informed, caring decision. We provide information about our facility, determine your payment options, and strategize about your loved one's regimen of care length of stay, and expected discharge to home. At the Ponce Therapy Care Center, we are proud that over 90% of those admitted to our rehabilitation program successfully return to home. In an industry that is often seen as the final alternative, our goal is to become your first option and facility of choice for skilled nursing and rehab services. The Ponce Therapy Care Center is located at 1999 Old Moultrie Road. Call us at 824-3311 or visit us online at poncecarecenter.com.
Letty and Bo Bozard and Jeff King talk about the latest going on at Bozard Ford.
We just had the best month we've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. Our sales numbers were 20% above our best record month ever. We beat every Jacksonville Ford dealer in sales volume for the month of July. So it was just a terrific month.
And it didn't just, and the success of the month wasn't just tied to sales. Parts and service had record months as well. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, there is no recession at State Road 16 and I-95 at the outlet malls because we're having a great time and doing big business at Bozard Ford right now.
Not only did it feel great to break the records and beat the guys up in Jacksonville, but what felt the best is the way that we did it. We're trying to do business the right way. We've put that message out there to the folks in our community, and they're coming out and doing business with us because they like the way we're doing business.
When you're out our way, come see us at Bozard Ford at the outlet malls.
Need cash for Christmas? Have a house full of stuff you believe might have some value? Expert buyers are here in St. Augustine from America's Antique Roadshow, and they're ready to buy it all. Gold and silver jewelry, watches, silverware, old coins, and artwork. America's Antique Roadshow, the #1 trusted buyer throughout the United States. At the Wingate Hotel, State Road 16, just west of I-95. Call 824-9229 for directions.
Okay, we're back. This is National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. We broadcast every Friday live from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida. Our radio show mission statement is to provide an educational experience for listeners in a promotional format for auctions across the country. Well, we're certainly doing that today. We've got Peter Monroe. He was former president of the Oversight Board of the RTC. I just asked him how much bigger of a problem what is going on right now compared to the RTC, which is about 20 years ago. And he astounded me a little bit with saying 50 times. And I knew the number was great, but I've never heard it in those numbers. And that's we all know it's a big problem, but 50 times bigger. How does Peter? You're on, right?
Yes,
okay.
I am.
Okay. The financial crisis, you told me it's 50 times bigger. Is there any other difference compared to the RTC days?
Yeah, the main differences really are, I think, that the problem is global.
Okay.
And you can see that when you see the stock markets react
Yep.
to problems, say in Europe with the with the financial situation of those countries and their potential as being people that we can export to, etc. So it's bigger because it's global.
Mm-hmm.
The Earth is flat, all that. It's bigger. It's bigger in part because the financial instruments, such as commercial mortgage-backed security, didn't exist back then. We created them back then, but they didn't exist. They didn't exist back then in any volume, and they became a huge part of the problem. So we weren't in a recession. It wasn't a global problem, and it was much easier to unravel, or if you will, let's just say sell mortgages, and commercial mortgages in particular, because commercial mortgages were really, that's what it was all about. In fact, you could almost, just to make it simple, you could say it was all about how can we get value, the most net present value to the taxpayer from these commercial mortgages that we inherited from the failed savings and loans, and that was kind of, when you boil everything down, that was our that was the toughest and most important, and I feel where we were most creative. We got lucky. We got an idea, and then it worked, and we made it work, and that was very exciting. And but it was it's different for all those reasons and others, but those are the main reasons. There was no real depression, no global recession.
Yep.
Easier to fix assets.
Well, you've got you had a great idea with the commercial-backed mortgage securities. What's happening now, though? With those, those securities, what's happening? Because we hear about it, and we've got everybody's got an opinion. What's your opinion on what's happening with them right now?
Well, they're kind of, the concept, the basic concept is of securitization, of course, is to take individual financial instruments, mortgages, and pool them together as just kind of like a source of cash, and then to take cash flow, and then take that cash flow and using rocket scientists, Wall Street type people, and slice and dice those cash flows, and that's where things got really complicated. And that's what's going on today. Is this so-called commercial conduit, now it is sort of another name for it. That became over the last, before 2007 and 8, the big crash. That became the primary way of financing commercial properties, and the whole process was so discredited that what everyone is dealing with now, right on commercial, is okay. Well, how are we going to finance commercial in the future? There's a group called the Commercial Real Estate Finance Council. It's more or less the epicenter of trying to figure this out, and they've created a term called CMBS 2, Commercial Mortgage-Backed Securities 2, which is supposed to be a kind of a variation on how to do that type of financing without all the conflicts of interest. And there have been signs of that, that they might come back and be viable, but there's just not traction for it. And to be blunt, I think in part it's because the inherent enormous conflicts of interest and lack of transparency. Nobody understood when they owned a mortgage-backed security. They never understood what was supporting the cash flow for that security, because the mortgages were all homogenized, and nobody ever really thought this. It was this sort of thing. It was that eternal optimism. Nobody ever thought that something would go wrong, and these commercial mortgage-backed securities were never designed really to handle the kind of problem that occurred. There was just no simple, okay, if there's a problem with it, here's what we do. There are such inherent conflicts of interest and confusion and complexity that there's been no solution as to how to unravel these commercial mortgage-backed securities.
Understand. You are obviously somebody that's had great experience in this business. You've been in Washington. You've been a graduate of Oxford University and Harvard Law School. Tell us about the single-family market, and what are your suggestions? If you had that golden wand, what would you do to try to kind of get us out of this unique problem?
Well, I have directly presented to the Obama.
Tell us about the single-family market, and what are your suggestions? if you had that golden wand, what would you do to try to kind of get us out of this this unique problem?
Well, I have directly presented to the Obama White House a very, some pretty specific program, and whether, it just goes the way of the circular, what do they call it, the circular filing cabinet, or whether or not they pay attention to it, I don't know. But I don't think that the problem can be solved right now when you have so many, again, projected up to 11 million mortgages, very likely will default, which would be just an enormous hit, and it's kind of swept under the carpet as a problem. So the question is, how do you deal with those? That to me is the crux. The country grew as a percentage of homeowners from like 65% to 69%. There were a lot of people that were kind of lured into home ownership, whatever. So to me, the solution, it's kind of like a waterfall. There's some mortgages that you've just got to amend the payments so that people can afford them. That's the nice simple one, and that's what the so-called HAMP program basically did. It just sort of said, hey, you know what, we'll reduce your payments on the mortgage. But then, of course, they tacked that on the principal. So, it worked a little, but not much. It didn't really have an impact. It was ineffective, and the HAMP program was a disaster, basically. So what has to happen, I believe there have to be principal reductions. But the problem is that if you reduce, if you reduce the principal balances on these mortgages, how are the people who are paying their mortgages going to accept that? It's just not fair as far as a lot of people, certain moral hazard, and it might cause other people to say, well, okay, then I'm going to default on mine and get the same break.
Yep.
And so without going into detail, I've come up with a series of ways of making it much more painful for folks to get principal reductions, to require them to, in a sense, earn it out. In other words, they could get maybe a third of their principal reduction if they paid their payments on time, and so on. So you do it in phases, and I'm also advocating the shared appreciation mortgage, which is a concept that, let's say you reduce from 250 to a mortgage from 250 to 200, 50% of the appreciation goes to the lender, but 50% stays with the homeowner, so at least they have the incentive to stay in there and make that work. Now, but that would solve a lot of problems. But what it won't there are people who still won't underwrite properly. They still won't be able to afford it. My recommendation there, again, in this waterfall, is that those people they lose title, but they become renters at a rent they can afford, but they have an option to repurchase at a reasonable price.
Okay.
And then you've got the homes where they just don't underwrite, and there you've got to evict. And so far I've talked about supply solutions. What you have to do at that point is we have to encourage a strong single-family rental industry. We all know about multifamily. In my opinion, I'm predicting this, there will be a massive and large new industry, income-producing property industry called the single-family rental industry. And we've got to create incentives for people to buy those houses, investors to buy those houses and then rent them to people. And to me, that's kind of simply stated. And the only other thing I would emphasize is that for those people who are paying, I think there should be a massive program to help all of those people refinance their houses at today's low interest rates, because that would unlock so much income buying power.
Yep.
So, and the government's been just reluctant to do that, and I think it's a shame. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and think of the disposable income that would generate by reducing people's mortgages from 6.5% to 4%, whatever. So that's, to me, in very short way, that's a solution.
We could spend 3 hours just on that one question, I think, Peter. But let's go on to something else, because we've touched on it a little bit. I've been up to Washington a couple of times recently. There's a couple of bills out there, and the Obama administration is trying to push this too. There's about 40,000 government surplus properties that are not being used. Estimates are up to $15 billion in money if we could sell these properties that aren't being used. That can help with the government deficit. These aren't houses. These are office, warehouse, land properties that have been unused for years and are costing the taxpayers millions of dollars. And I know you and I have talked a little bit about this, but I want to do one other thing. It's an article that came out, and it says one property already drawing attention is the old post office annex in Washington, D.C., and the facility loses $6 million a year, yet it hasn't been used in 10 years. That's just crazy money, and you're a businessman. If you're not using an asset and it's costing you a great deal of money and you have no plans for it, let's get it back into the hands. Let's sell it, help the budget deficit. And this is one of the bills that's out there is H.R. House Bill 1734 by Congressman Jeff Denham. He's got about 35 sponsors. What's your thoughts on these kind of properties? I mean, should we sell them? Should we, they're actually going down in value as we speak, and the taxpayers are paying for this stuff.
I'm so happy that you brought this one to my attention, because when we get off the phone, the first email that I'm sending out is to the National Economic Council about supporting this program. Bill Seidman, who's an icon in this area, and is kind of a role model for me and a hero, is no longer with us.
FDIC chairman for many years.
Right. He had a nice little rule of thumb. He said, as soon as a property gets in the hands of the government, it depreciates by 25%. So to the extent that we can keep that from happening, just in general.
Yep.
Now, these are properties in the hands of the federal government, and not only that, but they're not even being productive. So. To me, it's a no-brainer that that H.R. 1734 should be passed immediately. I mean, like with emergency.
Right.
I mean, how could anybody disagree with that? It just and what's interesting, and I haven't mentioned, but I remember how important the auction process was to the RTC. It's competitive. It's a way of moving assets, with done correctly, quickly. And I remember you and Lou Fisher leading the way as for the RTC in auctions, and I just
Thank you.
hope that they're smart enough to I'd love it. I'd love to see you just do it, And that's I may just be pretty blunt and just say, why don't you just call him up and let him do this. It's $15 billion that's just sitting on the table that should absolutely it's just got to happen.
Well, I think,
and you're the right guys to do it, and an auction is, I think, the right process for something like this.
Well, I appreciate that. The reason why I've always suggested that government use auctions is because, pick a property. You pick a property and you're going to sell it. if you don't do it through auction, then you may have several bids, several offers, and they're all different. The money could be different,
right,
but also financing or no financing, deposit or no deposit, due diligence or no due diligence, closing period or extended closing period. So you're comparing apples and oranges unless you have an auction, and everybody is on the same basis, and that way you as a government official say, listen, we advertised it well, here's all the people who responded, and this was the high bid, and sorry, Mr. Jones over there, sorry you didn't get it, but you could have got it. You just had to raise your hand higher, or in this world of the internet, bid on the computer one more time.
I 100% agree. I would like to ask you one question.
Sure.
Do you agree that, the better the information on the property, in other words, that the key, if you want our philosophy to get the most value from assets of the RTC was to expose it to as many people as possible.
Yes.
You want the right buyers to look at it and make a decision. And to the extent that, for example, the gold standard in evaluating commercial properties is Argus. And so, for example, to the extent that larger properties are all run through, if an Argus run is done, then I have found that you triple the number of people who will look at the property within the context of an auction or a competition. Do you agree with that? In other words,
I agree with that, Peter.
Yeah.
You in an auction scenario, you do your due diligence prior to bidding, and there is no, it's as is, where is, and your money is going to be at risk. And so you've got to do your due diligence prior to bidding, compared to what happens in regular real estate is, I'll put an offer on this building and I'll say, here it is, here's the amount, and I've got 90-day due diligence. And what happens many times is that it's retraded. And so let's say I bid $5 million and I've got 90 days, and then I do my due diligence, and guess what? I don't like this, I don't like this, so my $5 million isn't really $5 million anymore. I'll pay you 3.8. And what the seller has done is taken it off the market for 90 days and allowed him to basically get jerked around a little bit. And that's why, yes, environmental, is key today. Everything that you can provide the bidders on a fair basis, everybody gets the same thing, and then allow them to do other things, is very, very appropriate. We've got about...
Do you believe, in other words, the stalking horse kind of concept in the 363 bankruptcy auction, so on and so forth, where the stalking horse actually has to go out and do the due diligence for which they're reimbursed.
Yep.
They do the due diligence. They're reimbursed if they don't end up buying it. But then that due diligence becomes available to all the competitors, and therefore more competitors decide, okay, well, it's cost effective for me to make a bid because I don't have to do all this due diligence myself. So the extent that you reduce the due diligence costs for prospective buyers, more buyers are going to compete. Do you generally speaking agree with that philosophy?
I was in auction. I was the auction project manager for a bankruptcy auction in Miami less than a year ago. And what happened is there was a stalking horse offer. It was a bankruptcy court sale, and it was a shopping center in southwest Miami, and they had an offer of $16 million. And that became it's basically insurance policy for the bank and the court. And so what happens is the bank says, okay, we'll take your bid, but we're now going to market it. If you end up buying it, then wonderful, And if you don't, we'll pay you a fee, which is basically an exit fee, because we kind of used you a little bit. And what happened in this sale, it was incredible. We had 161 bids. It went from $16 million to $21 million. But it was, if we didn't have that stalking horse offer, I think that we may not have got that far. We had 8 bidders.
And if you hadn't had the stalking horse's due diligence made available in the vault to everybody.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, in other words, everybody had the information, and yet the stalking horse knew, A, that they'd be reimbursed. If they didn't get the property, they'd get reimbursed for their costs of doing the due diligence because it added to the value. And secondly, it's very common for someone to actually have to beat the price of the stalking horse offers by some amount, as kind of usually some kind of a reward rather than just reimbursement of costs. The reward being some reward. Is that
a percentage or fee?
Yeah, right.
And if
they
if they want, they can continue bidding. But they lose that fee or that percentage. So it's a good thing. We are almost done with the interview. Unfortunately, I wish I had another hour. I want to know what you're doing now, and how can people get a hold of you by website, email, telephone. You are a great interview. But what are you doing now? What are you focusing on, Peter?
At the moment, what we're focusing on it's a kind of a 3-part. Okay. First of all, I've been so fortunate in being able to associate with one of the top commercial receivers. And just for those who aren't familiar, a receiver is someone who's appointed by the court to take possession and control of a troubled property from the borrower.
Yep.
To basically represent the property. So. We're going to be doing that, and in doing that, you kind of quarterback the property. You act like an owner, and so you take one of the we align with with a CBRE or a Cushman or a JLL
sure.
or a Joe Grobanellis, whatever, and we basically act as if we're owners, and we maximize, we stabilize, protect, and maximize the value of the property. So, step one is I'm on the receivership subcommittee of the Florida Bar, so I kind of get the law. This fellow Peter Bursick has done 250 receiverships. We're going to move from receivership, eventually into demonstrating to one of the large Wall Street type companies.
Peter, we got about 40 seconds left. So how can people get a hold of you? How can people get a hold of you?
I'm sorry. The easiest way it would be to email me at T. Monroe, and that's like doctrine, at N as in Nelly, R as in rabbit, E as in elephant, V as in Victor, .com, or give me a call myself, which is 727-643-6303, and I assure you that I will respond to anyone who...
Peter, I've got to let you go. Thank you so much for your interview.